So before we start talking about the next step in variables, what I want to do is introduce a few new concepts to you, because we're going to need this throughout the course as well as in the next concept as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is operators. Now you should know what an operator is, simple term from math class. So the basic operators that C# deals with are the ones mostly that you probably recognize, things like plus, minus, multiply, divide, and then we're going to show another one at the end. What I want you to look at is the different symbols. So plus is the same as you've always seen it, minus, same as you've always seen it. Multiply is no longer just a little x anymore. We can't really use that because x could be a letter, a character, a variable, or it could be any number of things. So what we do is we actually use the symbol star, the asterisk, to symbolize multiply. Similar for divide, there's no real divide key on the keyboard, so what we use is we use the /. This is very similar if you look at something like this. 3 divided by 4. It's nothing more than a fraction. They both evaluate to 0.75. So there's nothing new there. It's just you need to understand that those are the symbols that we're going to use inside this class. So just to give you a few examples, you might see something like, let's say, 6 plus 4. That's going to result in a value of 10. But we can also use the plus sign with text. So we could see something like this. We could see, let's say, Bob plus Terwilliger. Let's see if I'm spelling that right, but I'm not sure. And that's going to result in Bob Terwilliger. Now you might be thinking, well, how the heck does that work? Well, it works because what C# does is when it sees the plus sign, it looks at what's to the left of it and what's to the right of it. If to the left and the right are strings or text, then it's going to try and add them together. But it doesn't add in the sense of math. What it does is it does a new thing called concatenate. Concatenate means essentially take whatever's on the right and stuff it at the end of whatever's on the left. So it just kind of sews them together. Concatenation. So we stuck these together. So whatever is between these quotes gets put together. So if there's a space before that T, then a space will exist right between the little b and the T. If there isn't a space, then they're going to be stuffed together like you see right here. So the plus sign has multiple functions inside of C#. The next thing we see is minus. Minus is the same as it's always been. 3 minus 5 is going to result in negative 2. See multiply, again, same type thing. You might see 2 times 4, and that's going to result in a value of 8. And then we have the divide sign. Now the divide sign is a little interesting because what's going to happen is when you divide something, typically when you divide, it's not always going to result in a nice even number. It might. You might do something like this, 4 divided by 2, which is going to go evenly and result in a value of 2. But it doesn't always work like that. If you try and do 3 divided by 4, well, we know that that's supposed to result in 0.75. But what C# does is it looks at the numbers that you're trying to divide. And if it sees that you're dividing integers, it's going to treat the result like an integer. That's a problem, because if you result in 0.75, there's no whole number there. All you have is a decimal place. What C# does is when you're dividing integers, it does something called truncate. It literally cuts off the decimal places. No matter what, it does not round, it cuts them off. So what's going to end up as a result for this is going to be 0. So if you actually want to get 0.75, you need to do 3.0 divided by 4.0. So C# knows that you're actually, trying to get the decimal places, and that will result in 0.75. So we got to be very careful of this. Remember, that means it's going to truncate the decimal places off. It's going to cut them off. The last operator that we're going to look at is something called mod. Mod is short for modulus. Now this is a term that you may hear in later years of high school mathematics, but not too often. It does have a lot of uses in computer science, but not so many other uses in too many other places. What modulus is essentially remainder. So if you have a division, let's say for example, you have the division, or so let's say for example you have the term 5 mod 3. What that's going to result in is a value of 2. So let me read to you how this actually works. It's saying, how many times does 3 go evenly into 5, and what's the remainder? So 3 goes evenly into 5 exactly once. And what's left of the 5? 2. So the result of 5 mod 3 is 2. Another example of this might be 3 mod 5. So this is saying, well, how many times does 5 go into 3? 0. What's left over of the 3? Well, all of it, because none of it was used up. So the result would be 3. So right now that may not seem that it's going to be a lot of use, but it will once you start looking at it a little bit more later on in the course. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is another term. Let me just get rid of all this. Another term called an expression. Again, this is another term that you probably heard from math class. Now, you've probably noticed by now that we do a lot of mathematics in this. This is because computer science is very closely related to mathematics. But back on track here, an expression is essentially anything that evaluates to a result. Supposed to be a G there. Anything that evaluates to a result. If it can't evaluate, then it's not going to be useful to us anyway. So we have an expression, anything that evaluates to a result. So it might be something like this, 50. Well, 50 evaluates to 50. That is a result. We might have 2 times 3. That evaluates to the value of 6. We might have Mr. plus Lane. That evaluates to a result as well. Mr. Lane. There also can be some tricky ones as well. You might have something like this, just true. Remember our Boolean data? True evaluates in just true. There's no complication there. That one's fairly straightforward. But then, as I said, some things can get complicated. What if we have something like this? 5, 5, 5 plus Autumn Hill. Now we know that's the address of our school, but look what's actually happening here. We're trying to add an integer to a string. How is C# going to handle this? Is it going to give us an error? Well, maybe, but not really. What actually is going to happen here is C# is going to see that you're trying to add a number to text. And it's going to take that for granted. It's going to assume what you actually want to do is treat that number like text. So what you're going to end up with a result here is 5, 5, 5, Autumn Hill. So it actually treated that 555 like text, which is actually pretty useful. Okay, so what we've done so far is that we've talked about the operators that we have to work with in C#, and we also talked about what an expression is. These are both going to be key terms when we get into the next portion of what a variable is.